Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. It's Groundhog's Day. That's right. And the question I've got, if Trump sees his shadow, will we have 6 more years of treason? Maybe. If an anti-vaxxer sees their shadow, 6 more years of COVID. I'm not quite sure, but it is Groundhog's Day. And, well, if you stop and you look back, and this is one of those things that's really interesting to me. The economy doing really, really well. In fact, the numbers doing really well. 5.7% for the full year. Do you remember? And this is again why I think this is an interesting day to remember. Much like the movie The Same Day coming over and over again. When Trump had his best year, and that was 1 quarter growth of 3%. He was like, hey, we're back. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. Look what we've done. Look what we've accomplished. And it's all in how the message is presented. And look, on a certain level, you got to give Trump credit. He's always the eternal optimist. Even when everything is burning down, the country is under attack. Well, granted, he led the attack. But, even then, look at my people fighting for me. Always the sunny optimist. Democrats, not so much. And I think Democrats need to take a little lesson in that. And they need to, say, look, things are good. We're getting things done. We're moving forward. But yeah, all just one of those things for the day. But again, if Trump does see a shadow, does that mean more treason? Maybe so. Second time this week that the the historically black colleges and universities have been under siege. And I'm not quite sure why this now. I think a lot of it has to do with Biden saying that he's going to appoint a black woman on the Supreme Court. I think that made some of the crazy people a little crazier. And at least 16 historically black colleges and universities here in this country have received bomb threats. And that happened on Tuesday. Now, fortunately, they have not found any bombs, fortunately. And I'm not challenging them to do it. But this is one of those things where you go, what's the purpose in this? Terror. These are terrorists. And we should be hunting down these terrorists and holding them accountable and throwing them in a dark place. This is wrong on any level, and anyone who would do this should be outed. They should be publicly shamed. They should be publicly dealt with, and dealt with harshly. Just my thoughts. I had to get that out there because I saw this. I'm going, this is not who we are, or maybe sadly, it's who some of us are. And those are the people we got to deal with. Some good news, and let's go to some good news. Some good news, at least 54 Starbucks have filed for union elections. 54 of them around the country, out of that one little campaign in Buffalo. And I remember at the time going, gee, you wonder why Starbucks, this giant multi-state, huge conglomerate, is fighting so much in the little town there of Buffalo, where three places were saying, hey, we'd like to have some respect. You wondered why they sent out the former CEO, why they had executives out there, sweeping floors and, patting people on the back and, hey, we're partners. Partner. Granted, I make $170,000 a year and you make barely over minimum wage, but hey, we're still partners. And the thing about partners, generally partners have some bit of, some bit of equality, some bit of a, similarity, some bit of, some say in that place. As where the people who actually do the work, not so much, which is why they voted for a union there in Buffalo. Now 54 of them across the country are jumping into this. And I'm, about time people go, yeah, we do need to have some bit of voice. So good for them. Also, our friends over at the Center for American Progress, who we have on the program quite often, Our friends over there are in the middle of a contract negotiations right now. I'm wishing them the best, hoping all of their issues get addressed. The sad thing is, though, the floor, the salary floor there is like 40 grand. And you go, wow, that's a lot of money. No, not in Washington, D.C. That's one of those things where you've got to go to all of the congressional events, and you've got to go to all of the, all of the get-togethers, because you got to steal the crackers. This is one of those things. And I've had congressional staffers who, evidently something like 13% of them make less than the poverty rate, and a number of them are on the verge of homelessness, which is why, interestingly enough, only wealthy people get to send their kids to be those kind of interns. We got to do better. Got to do better. And this administration should be the administration that does that. Now, my big anger of the day. Joe Biden ran on the Build Back Better idea. And look, I'm a fan of what he's doing. I've said from the beginning he's the most pro-union president of my lifetime. The fact that he fired Peter Robb on day one, who was the general counsel at the NLRB, that made me very happy, considering Peter Robb's past as a union buster behind what happened during the Reagan years with Patco and the firing of the Patco workers. Happy to see that. Happy to see his number two go. And a lot of the things that Biden's been able to do through executive orders, happy with. Wish we could get some legislation. Wish we could do that quickly. Wish we had 50 Democrats on the same page. But one of the things that President Biden said is we're going to buy American, we're going to build American, and we're going to build union. And I point to this story that our friend Stephen Greenhouse wrote. Evidently, this company, Oshkosh Defense, they won a giant contract, massive contract to build the next generation of new postal vehicles. About 165,000 of them over the next decade. They're saying somewhere around, somewhere in excess of $10 billion this contract's going to be. And the idea is that it's going to create 1,000 jobs. And this is where some people are kind of upset. Oshkosh Defense has several factories, several facilities, all in the state of Wisconsin. And this is one of those things where you go, they got the contract, they made the bid, and part of that bidding process was the fact that this is a company that has been unionized for, well, virtually ever. This is a company that's been around for years, and since I think they've been a union company since like 1938. I mean, we're talking long-standing, good relationship, with the community. With that, this would be the perfect place. This would be the perfect place for Biden's Build Back Better plan to be put into place. This would be the shining example of living what he wanted laid out. An American company who kept manufacturing here through the hard times, stayed in Wisconsin, kept those jobs, union jobs, while others were trying to do other things. This would have been a great story. Winning this big contract because of their record, because of their solid stance in the community, and all of that stuff. All of that flowery kind of stuff that you see on documentaries and on sales brochures. It was going to be great. This was going to be the example, the shining star of how we're going to rebuild America, how we're going to remanufacture, how we're going to reshore, how we're going to rebuild the American middle class. This was going to be great. It was going to be fabulous. These were going to be 1,000 new union jobs, good family-sustaining wages, health security, retirement security, good quality jobs, the kind that are careers, the kind that aren't just, you go to work, punch a clock, and, whatever. These are career jobs. These are skilled career jobs. It was set. The model was being set. Except the company decided, well, we're going to evaluate some locations. We're going to look around. And what they thought that meant was, of their 7 locations within the state of the several places they've got here in the U.S., all in Wisconsin, they would choose one of those in Wisconsin. I guess this is where contract language matters, because evidently the company Oshkosh Defense, they decided, well, we should go looking in other places. We got this more than $10 billion contract. Let's see if we can cheat people out of wages. Let's see if we can get lower labor costs, so we can do what? Oh yeah, line our pockets and feed the shareholders. So what they did is, like all union busting companies, think Boeing, they decided, well, we're gonna go look around, which led them to South Carolina. South Carolina, with its 1.8% union density rate, one of the lowest wage states in the country. Evidently, there was a former Rite Aid warehouse that was just perfect. In fact, Oshkosh Defense called it, a turnkey plant that they could ramp up production immediately, and it was going to be great, because evidently, according to them, South Carolina's got the best skilled workforce. Now, the only assembly plant that makes cars in South Carolina is the BMW plant in this area. And you go, well, I don't know how many people they've trained, but I don't know that you're going to get better than what you had in Wisconsin. What you're going to get, though, is cheaper. And this is, again, another way to fleece the American taxpayer, because with cheaper labor comes shoddier products. We know this. We've lived this. We've seen it. It is what it is. So now the Postal Service is under kind of pressure, because everyone's going, hey, this isn't what this was supposed to be. Now, the Postal Service, they came out and said, hey, wait a second. We followed the guidelines, had to be made in the U.S. And this is, we follow the guidelines. This is what it is. So people in Wisconsin, and I'll add my name to the list, not in Wisconsin, but I'll add my name to the list of people reaching out to President Biden saying, you got to do something about this. This was not the plan. This was not the way forward. This is not the shining example that we need on how we're going to rebuild the middle class and rebuild the working class of this country into one of a prosperous one. Tammy Baldwin, the senator from there, said Oshkosh Defense has a history of manufacturing trucks for the government service in Wisconsin with skilled union labor, so I remain deeply concerned that they decided to manufacture postal trucks where it appears to be a newly acquired facility with inexperienced, likely non-union hires in South Carolina. She says, I want these trucks made in Wisconsin. And I don't blame her, because, again, if you go back to what the president was throwing out there, and I agree with, and I am 100% behind. We want to build in America. We want to build in the U.S. first and foremost, and we want union jobs. And this is where government procurement matters. This is where policy ideas matter. We can rebuild manufacturing in this country. We can do it immediately. We can bring all those jobs back from China, all kinds of stuff, and just pay Chinese wages. We can employ everyone. Now, understand, Republicans will tell you there are a number of them out there, so we don't need a minimum wage. If people are hungry enough and desperate enough to work for poverty wages in horrible conditions, let them do it. It's their liberty. It's their freedom. It's their choice. They've chose to work for $1 an hour. So if people are, like I said, hungry enough and desperate enough, oh boy, the CEO class, who has never been happier, it would be even happier, because, that pesky minimum wage. And this is another one of those examples of for me anyway, of an opportunity. And I'm hoping it doesn't go missed, because we should be rebuilding our manufacturing. We should rebuild the nation, but we should be doing it in a way that raises everyone up, that doesn't just fatten the bottom line, but that actually helps support families. And this is one of those things where political stuff matters. I look at the Republicans running around right now saying, look at the infrastructure we're bringing back to the district, taking credit for an infrastructure bill that they didn't vote for. This kind of thing. The representatives in South Carolina going, look what we brought for you, when they had nothing to do with it. And, I've often said, politics is a blood sport. There's some some to the victor goes the spoils. One of the things that I've kind of admired about Joe Biden is that he didn't punish red states. He didn't punish anyone who didn't vote for him like the former guy did. But there's part of me that goes, at some level, don't you have to? On some level, don't you have to make, places that supported you better off? I mean, they didn't get any Republican votes for the infrastructure. None. In a functional democracy, in a functional system, you would have Republicans voting for this stuff because it means investment. But none of them did. So it's always been my view that if you didn't vote for it, you don't get it. If I'm your representative and I don't fight for you and I don't bring anything back and I don't do the job that you need me to do, eventually you're going to throw me out and get somebody who will do what you need to do. That is a functional system. The one we currently have, you have people who voted against all of this, all of the infrastructure, all of the rescue plan, all of the things that have gone on, and more. And they're not afraid of being held accountable because they're able to go back to their districts and go, yeah, sure, I voted against it, but look, it's back here anyway. Look what I was able to do. So if I've got something for the president, you got to get involved in this. This cannot happen. This cannot be how we build back better. To me, building back better is raising the conditions, raising the wages, raising the environment for working people. And I fear this does not do that. Now you say, but Rick, now you're pitting states against each other. Exactly what Republicans have been doing for the longest time. But Rick, we're better than that. Yeah, but at some level, you've got to use policy to raise the floor. And for me, that's what it is. It's about raising that floor. If we continue the race to the bottom, we all eventually end up on the bottom, don't we? At least that's my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, podcast, grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Share it with your friends, all of that. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. The talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1848. That was the day the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. It signaled the end of the Mexican-American War. The war began in May of 1846 when the United States sought to expand its annexation of Texas. It immediately became a partisan issue between pro- and anti-slavery forces. Southern Democrats and slave plantation owners favored war with Mexico. They hoped to undercut rising Northern industrial power with the expansion of slave territory. Whigs and Northern abolitionists opposed the war for the same reasons. After almost 2 years of fighting, the war ended. In exchange for $15 million, the United States gained 525,000 square miles of land. This territory included all or parts of Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Mexico gave up all claims to Texas, and the Rio Grande was established as the border. The initial treaty promised protection of land, civil rights, and full citizenship for those Mexicans who stayed on the newly acquired territory. These guarantees were deleted from the final ratification. Expansionist aims reignited debates about the extension of slavery. The newly formed Free Soil Party gained traction with its campaign to limit, localize, and discourage slavery. Their banner read, "Free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men." Antagonisms were briefly tempered with the Compromise of 1850. This allowed California to be admitted as a free state. It also prevented the outlawing of slavery in the new territories. The slave trade was banned in the District of Columbia, but a new and more stringent fugitive slave law was enacted. Debates regarding expansion of slavery would rage on throughout the 1850s, culminating in the Civil War.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Quote of the day. And, the more I find out about Adam Kinzinger, the more I kind of like him. It's sad he's not going to be around. But he said, I hate to be so personal, but Josh Hawley is one of the worst human beings and a self-aggrandizing con artist. He said, when Trump goes down, I certainly hope this evil will be laid in the open for all to see and be ashamed of. And what he's talking about is, and this is amazing to me. I guess I grew up during the Cold War, and the idea that the Republican Party would be on the side of Putin and the Russian government it doesn't sit right with me. But evidently this is what he's saying. Basically, let Ukraine go, let them be on their own, walk away from them, and let Putin do what he wants. I struggle with that, and I think Jen Psaki was right. He should be. It's disgusting that he's basically parroting Russian talking points, and I'm still struggling with how the Republican Party got that far off of the beaten path. And here to share some thoughts on, maybe how that happened and if there's any hope. I've asked Jeff Timmer to come talk with us. Jeff is a political strategist, senior advisor with the Lincoln Project, also co-founder of Republicans and Independents for Biden, also the co-host of a fabulous podcast, A Republican Podcast One. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look on how to get to that. But Jeff, thanks for taking some time for us.
Thanks, Rick. It's very nice to be here. And, where the Republican Party is today, is just, it blows my mind, having grown up in the Republican Party, having worked in the Republican Party for 30 years, having directed and led the Michigan Republican Party, watching these Republicans, or so-called Republicans, parrot the talking points of the Kremlin. The party that helped win the Cold War is dead and gone, and it's been replaced by these fraudulent imposters, people like Josh Hawley, who have no conviction, who stand for nothing, who don't understand what America stood for, and it's horrible to watch, and it's frightening to think that they're that close to coming back into power.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary, but you think about the Republicans love to throw Ronald Reagan out as the sainted one and all of that. And I've said a number of times, Reagan is nowhere recognizable in this party. The fact that the person who's given credit for bringing down the wall and the fall of communism and all of that, to now have that same party siding with Vladimir Putin, I struggle with that. I think there are some Republicans that do too.
There are, and Kinzinger's a great example. And there's a lot of Republicans who cravenly and cowardly sit by and watch this all happen, afraid to say anything because they think it will cost them. They think it will cost them their position of power, their chairmanship, or their role in the party. And if these people today who are elected or who are serving as Republicans around the country had been in charge during the 70s and 80s, the wall never would have come down. The Soviet Union would have never been defeated because these people stand for nothing.
Well, I don't know about that. They stand for tax cuts. We gave tax cuts to the very wealthy. They stand for Trump being reinstalled as president. There's some things they value. They're just not American values. They're just not democratic values.
Right. Yeah. And democracy with a small d, they're against that too. And so, the fact of the matter is now we have two kinds of people in this country. We have Republicans and we have Americans. And that's where we stand today.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the messaging that I've been trying to get my Democratic friends to come around to. The reality is, in this moment, the boat's on fire, and we better all be grabbing buckets because it's democracy or not. Do you believe in institutions and the rule of law, or do you not? That seems to be a very simple choice. Could even fit on a bumper sticker.
It could, but then I watch the congressional Democrats play their baseball game, annual baseball game with the Republicans and pretend everything's normal like it used to be. Those are the kinds of things that people need to wake up and realize the game has fundamentally changed, and the Republicans they're not just playing by different rules. They're taking the game board, tipping it over, and eating the pieces.
I'm actually speechless because I couldn't have said it better myself. You're dealing with people who are willing to burn the house down, which is why I think Adam Kinzinger came out and said, look, we have to have some uneasy alliances. And I've talked about this for, well, now a long time. We've had Joe Walsh on the program numerous times over the last couple of years. And, if you would have told me in 2010, 11, 12 that I would be friendly with Joe Walsh and fighting in the same direction, I'd have told you were crazy. But here we are. We agree on nothing policy-wise except the fact that we believe in democracy and we believe in the rule of law. And that's enough to bring us together. So I'm guessing, that would be an example of his uneasy alliances that Kinzinger's talking about.
No, definitely. And it was so refreshing to see Kinzinger say what he really thinks about Josh Hawley, because it's so rare in politics that people actually say what they think. And there's people think that about Ted Cruz, they think that about Josh Hawley. It was great to hear. And the fact of the matter is, we are at a point where it doesn't matter that we used to be partisan opponents when things were normal, that we disagreed on what marginal tax rates were or should be back in 2012. I get people coming at me all the time from the left saying, but you helped create this. Okay, but what are we going to do about it now? I can't go back and change what I did in 2012. I can only go forward and change what we're going to do in 2022. And that's fight for the soul of this country.
Which is why I didn't bring that up to you. I mean, to be honest, it's one of those questions that everyone goes, well, you're responsible, and we want to hang this around someone's neck. And I'm going, no, Jeff, your sins are going to be forgotten for now. We got work to do. Let's move forward. We can bicker about that other stuff later when we're not worrying about a dictator in the White House with the largest military basically in history at his disposal. I think that's a little more pressing.
Well, definitely. And, I'm not looking to somehow get Republicans back into power down the road. So I don't somehow think they're going to suddenly pivot and, that there's any way that they can be redeemed. The Lincoln Project isn't looking to now go out in 2026 or 2028 and start electing Republicans again. Those days are done. This party, as we knew it, the party that we grew up in, that's dead. And it's gone. Someday there will be a stable center right again in this country, but it's not going to be for a long time.
Yeah. Now I get the same kind of messaging from the left. That the Democratic Party is just as bad. We should abolish both of them. This kind of both sidesism that we get all the time. Is there any redemption for the Democratic Party, do you think? Because look, I think you're right. I think the Republicans are beyond redemption. What about the Democrats, for those who are out there thinking, well, the Democrats are just as bad?
Well, I think they need to wake up and recognize what's at stake here. This isn't about whether or not you agree with what they're doing on policy, whether they're going far enough. It has nothing to do with policy. We're not going to have the luxury of debating whether or not we should forgive student loans, or whether or not we should expand Medicaid, Medicare. We're not going to be able to have those debates if we're not allowed to vote, if democracy disappears. And it's not sensational, it's not hyperbolic to say that is possible. Look at where we've come and how quickly we've got here, how far we've moved in just the last 5 years, to a point where we now have one major party who just refuses to accept the outcome of elections. And there's 70 million people who go along with that. We are hanging by a thread here, and we have to defeat them, or they're going to destroy us.
And this is where my frustration is.
I mean,
and you hit it on it a second ago, that they're going to go play baseball together. Joe Manchin's having parties with with Republicans and doing all this stuff, and I'm going, if it is as we're saying, and I believe it is. I don't believe you're being hyperbolic. I believe the rule of law is under attack. I believe 230 plus years of history is under attack. How come we're not seeing that out of the Democrats? And that's what the message is. Why aren't we seeing that sense of urgency that you and I both feel? I think the average voter is asking that question.
Well, I think we're starting to see some good signs of it. I mean, we're seeing, I think, more focused rhetoric coming out of the White House, out of the January 6th committee in the House. I think those we have to recognize they're moving slower than I think all of those of us who realize what has transpired, the depth and the breadth of the crimes and the people involved would like to see. But if they're going to prosecute this case, if they're going to be turning over evidence to the DOJ, if the DOJ is doing their job, they've got to make sure that they hit this out of the park. They can't go out and start arresting Republicans, arresting Trump, arresting those involved in January 6th until they've got an airtight case that's going to stand up in a court of law. Because if they swing and miss, it's all over too.
No, you're absolutely right. But, I keep coming back to, and maybe this is just me looking at the Republicans and how masterful you guys used to be in messaging and how masterful they really are in the media machine that they control. This stuff should have been done last year. We should be much further down the road. And I know if the Republicans were doing this, and I look at the Benghazi hearings, it's all we would be hearing about.
I agree. I mean, I look back and think of all the times I've screamed at my TV and screamed at my screen and screamed on Twitter over the last year about what are we doing? Why are we talking about this? Because we need to be elevating the urgency, nationalizing this election. This is if the Democrats fight this election on the terms of that they would in a normal off-year election, where all try to localize each race and pretend that this bigger picture attack on democracy itself isn't happening, we're in for a world of hurt. They've got to wake up. They've got to nationalize this election around the principle of democracy. It's the only thing that's going to forestall the Republicans from getting at least one of the chambers in Washington back, and then it's going to be mayhem for the last 2 years of President Biden's first term.
I'm right there with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Jeff Timmer. Jeff is a political strategist, senior advisor with the Lincoln Project, co-founder of Republicans and Independents for Biden, also the co-host of a Republic podcast, where you can get all your podcasts. Look for that. We'll get links out on social media how you can do it. Now, Donald Trump, called Lindsey Graham a rhino. The guy who basically had his head up Trump's butt the whole time he was in office is now being attacked because he had the audacity to say pardoning the January 6th rioters would be inappropriate. Now under the bus. Does this matter to any of his supporters?
No, it doesn't. The loyalty is a one-way street. Trump has none toward any of the sycophants who've been, humping his shin for, as long as he's been in office, or now since he's left office. And somebody like Lindsey Graham, Trump says, calls him a rhino. Lindsey gets all anxious and stressed and pees on the carpet for a couple days, but he'll be back down at Mar-a-Lago. He'll be playing golf and sucking up and saying I didn't really mean it, and Trump will give him a couple noogies on his head, and I don't know, make him play golf without pants or something to so that he feels chastened. But Lindsey will be back there looking for the love.
I'm sorry, but I've got that image in my head, and I can't unsee that. That is just not, and you've broken my wife. She can't now unsee it. Now the next part I was going to go into was the weird thing is that people put up with this. I look at the Ted Cruz's, I look at the Grahams, and they put up with it because evidently there's this belief that the base is so powerful. But yet I'm looking at some of the fundraising numbers, and the people that Trump has backed, their fundraising is lagging behind, even as the Republicans that are running for office are getting much more extreme. What do you make of that?
Well, he's getting behind and endorsing these I don't know, outright kooks who have no political skills, who have no political networks, and so this fundraising is a new thing for them. What isn't, I guess, factored in yet is the value, the what they're going to realize from Trump's support and endorsement in many of these primaries. And then in red states, in safe Republican primaries, the endorsement of Trump could be enough to overcome the traditional fundraising structure of the establishment Republicans, to use the term that they would apply. It may be enough, but everyone, they like to point to, we'll recreate the Glenn Youngkin model. You can't recreate Glenn Youngkin when you've got these candidates with 3 eyes. They're Star Wars Cantina characters, and that's who the Republicans are going to be nominating in these states like Michigan and Arizona and Pennsylvania and Georgia. And
hopefully every one of those states don't nominate someone like Terry McAuliffe, who I thought ran just a poor campaign and did all the wrong things at the wrong time. So I'm hoping that is. But, recently we talked with Joe Trippi, who's a Democratic strategist, and he was saying that he's hopeful that the Democrats aren't going to lose because Republicans have gone off the deep end. And I'm going, yeah, I don't know. I think they've gone off the deep end already. I don't know how much further off the quote unquote deep end they can go when the Confederate flag is marched through our Capitol, and that doesn't send the country into a collective bit of insanity, wanting blood. I don't know what else does, though.
Yeah, when the news breaks over the weekend that there was the second memo, that there was plots to seize the voting machines, seize the ballots, have the military effectively help install Trump in a second term, even though he had clearly lost the election. And that's not the biggest news story of the day. Everyone's up Monday morning going, hey, Tom Brady retired. I don't know. How do we get past that? Apathy is the enemy of democracy, and we've got to wake people up, or we don't deserve to have what we've had here in this country, and we need to make an exfil plan. Yeah. Head to Canada.
You're spot on. I actually just tweeted that out yesterday. Look, division's a problem, but apathy's a much bigger problem, because you don't have people who are I don't think outraged enough in this moment. Now, here's the other part of this, and I think I learned this in 2011 when they tried to recall Scott Walker. People are just tired of being inundated with all of this insanity. They just want to go back to their lives, and they've written off politics, which is a win for people like Trump and I would argue people like the Republicans.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, their apathy is, they can make the noise go away, the constant deluge, when the government takes over all the airwaves and you have people, jackbooting, goose stepping down the main streets of the country. Then they can, not worry about politics. It's going to be too late, clearly, at that point. Yeah. But we've got to make people care more about who wins these elections than who wins American Idol.
Last question, about 20 seconds. The Democrats got a chance? Do you think it's possible they hold on to one or both chambers?
I absolutely do. I think the cake is far from baked. There's so many things that can happen with COVID, with the economy, with international, with what's going on in Ukraine. There's so many things that can change the trajectory of this race.
Good stuff. Jeff, I appreciate the time. Sure. I hope you'll come back and talk to us again real soon.
I hope to, Rick. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff. Jeff Timmer. Political strategist, senior advisor there with the Lincoln Project. Remember, check out his podcast, A Republic Podcast. We'll get links out on social media. How you can do that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1821. That was the birthday of the first woman to earn her medical degree in the United States. Her name was Elizabeth Blackwell. She was born in Bristol, England. Her family moved to the United States when she was just 11 years old. Elizabeth decided she wanted to pursue a career in medicine. She believed that women patients should have the option of a female doctor. But it was not easy to make her dream come true. Medicine was considered men's work. Undeterred, Elizabeth began to study medicine on her own. Medical schools rejected her applications. Finally, she was accepted to the Geneva Medical College in New York. Most students at the school were horrified by the idea of a woman studying medicine, but she won many over with her ability and hard work. In 1849, she completed her work and graduated. But her difficulties were not over. No hospital in New York would hire her. She was even refused rental space when landlords found out she wanted it for a woman-run medical practice. Finally, she purchased a home for her practice. She also started a medical dispensary for the poor in New York City. She was later joined in her work by her sister. who also graduated with a medical degree. She went on to lecture on medicine in England, becoming the first woman to have her name on the British Medical Register. She and her sister helped to train nurses for service during the Civil War. They also founded a women's medical college that operated for 31 years. By her determination, Elizabeth Blackwell helped open the door for future generations of women to work in the field of medicine. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So ever since we had the bridge collapse in Pittsburgh, a lot of talk about infrastructure, a lot of talk about the state's failure to invest in infrastructure, something I've been talking about for, all 17 years of me doing this. The fact that we've been needing to invest in better roads, bridges, in our infrastructure, better airports, waterways, all of that stuff. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers keeps reminding us we're failing. We're failing on so many levels. And even the $1.2 trillion, the historic $1.2 trillion, is only a third of what we actually needed. Let me check the watch again. 2 years ago. So we got a lot to do. But here's the thing. We're going to get that bridge in Pittsburgh fixed. My hope is at some point, and I know this is just me hoping and wishing, I hope we fix things before they collapse. Because can you imagine being on a city bus that goes 150 feet down into a ravine and having to have a human chain of people to get you out? Yeah, me neither, which is why I'd prefer not to do it. And here to share some thoughts on infrastructure, the need for better and more infrastructure. I've asked our good friend Austin Kaiser to come talk with us. Austin is the assistant to the president of government affairs at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the IBEW. Austin, thanks for taking time for us.
I appreciate it, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So are we on the same page? We would like to have infrastructure that we repair before it collapses. Maybe just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't just need repaired. A lot of it needs just upgraded so that it can be efficient and useful in the society we live in today instead of what it was 70 years ago. So, we think transmission lines and electrical infrastructure, a lot of it's still functioning at the level that it needed to function at a long, long time ago, but without significant upgrades. And we're not going to be able to support the new industries of the future. We're not going to be able to support electric vehicle infrastructure. So tons of build out need to happen, tons of upgrades need to happen. But you're absolutely right. We've watched our infrastructure basically disintegrate before our eyes, like a third world country in many places. And I look at my coastal areas and other areas that are affected by extreme weather events that are sort of the worst effects of climate change. We have to do things like raise infrastructure out of the floodplains. Yep. And so these are massive investments, and there are a lot of jobs here too, right? So they can drive the economy at the same time. And we just seem to be, people like to bury their head in the sand and pretend like we don't have to deal with it.
Now, before we go any further, I want to throw a quick shout out to your members because the Northeast just got slammed with a big bomb storm or whatever they were calling it. And your members are out there keeping the power on. And I want people to remember that it's the IBEW members who are out there stringing those lines and fixing things in the worst possible weather to make sure that you don't freeze in your homes. So quick shout out to you guys and the folks who actually did that, because I know I got friends who live up that way. It was brutal.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, people forget they're the first of the first responders. There's a major event. They got to go in and get electricity back on. They've got to get critical infrastructure like hospitals and nursing homes and other things up and running, pumps, all sorts of things to keep cities from flooding. They're usually the first ones in, even before the National Guard and local law enforcement will go in and rescue sometimes, especially in flood areas. They need to make sure the water's not energized. So first guys in, and they live down there in their trucks for weeks and are up and, like you talked about New England and major winter events. They're sleeping in their trucks if they're sleeping at all, working around the clock to get things back up and running.
And this is where I come back to Austin, going, the infrastructure bill was great. $1.2 trillion is a good start. And I know a lot of people, this is the end of the road. No, to me, this is a start. Because as I said, the American Society of Civil Engineers said 2 years ago that we needed 3 times this amount just to get to even, not to get to the point to where my grandparents' generation fought for, which was at the edge of technology and getting to the extent of possible. We're just saying we just want to be even. So we're not looking at getting A's anymore. We're looking at B minus. We're okay with that. For me, I think we want to go further. And then on the electrical part of this, we shouldn't have your guys having to live in trucks in horrible weather. We should be investing the kind of infrastructure that we need, because these storms are coming. And in places like Texas, things are going to get worse. And with climate change coming on, it's going to get even worse. So we need to be redoing all of this stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do a whole show like on Puerto Rico, or the coasts in Florida, and what's happening there. But yeah, no, we have to invest in a real way. But we also have to think about, like, we're talking about transmission lines and some of that infrastructure, but our power plants and our energy generation is a major issue here too. And you talk about the money. It's not enough to completely upgrade everything. It's a big chunk. I think it's as far as Biden can get folks to go right now. We're hoping to double down on a little bit with the Build Back Better agenda, but we're in a little bit of a deadlock there.
But in talking about moving forward and doing this stuff, and I've been talking about the electric vehicles, and I've been talking about all of the changes that are happening in the auto industry and in other industries where we have to have this just transition. You look at these power plants that we're closing, the coal fire ones, these that are in communities that were mainstay job creators that brought power in. We've got to figure out how, while moving away from the past stuff, to make sure that people have a just transition, that they don't their lives don't become worse, that things aren't dumped at their doorstep as we've done in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, it all ties together, right? This whole economy is pretty intertwined, and energy is actually the largest part of the economy, and it's a big deal. So if you take these communities, and I'm going to give just a very direct example. So I come from a town called Portsmouth, Ohio, in a county called Scioto County, Ohio. It's in southeast Ohio. It's tucked in the hills, beautiful country down there.
I know where it is.
The entire economy is driven by coal-fired power plants, coal country, right? Even though there's not many coal mines left in that area, still all the plants are coal-fired. It was the biggest train yard, Norfolk and Southern Yard, between New York and Chicago. When I was a kid, right? Barge traffic, we call it coal barges. It's barge traffic, though, up and down the Ohio River, moving. And we had a major steel mill that, was mostly coal-fired, coal-blasted coking facilities where they, treat the coal, then using the blast furnaces. And all those are gone now, right? All of them are gone. And we get it, right? Benzene was a major polluter. There's all sorts of things that were happening. AEP and others made decisions to offload coal out of their assets because of power purchase agreements, arrangements, the Ohio Clean Air Authority, all sorts of complex, matrix of public policy. But what nobody thought about it was what they were going to do to the communities when they shut these jobs down. They thought environment only. And what we have to realize is that two things can be true at the same time. Correct. The environment needs cleaned up and good jobs have to exist. And because abject poverty kills as many, if not more people than the pollution does, right? Now, the pollution's, a little harder, it's hard to reverse, but so is poverty, especially when we get into generational poverty. So now we took a community that was all union jobs. These guys are making, very, very good money. They're driving the economy. The town was booming. When I was a kid, it was solid middle class. Now it's absolutely decimated. It looks like a third world country, right? And you talk about infrastructure. The people who are left behind without jobs can't afford to maintain the infrastructure they have. They can't maintain the mileage of sewer lines underneath their streets. The tax base just isn't there anymore. And their bonded indebtedness is so high that they can't borrow money anymore, right? So without this infusion coming from the infrastructure plan, they can't even do the basic necessities of fixing a busted sewer line under their streets on many occasions. And sometimes it takes them weeks to get done what they used to do in a night. And it's just totally decimated. But now the biggest job creators, the biggest employers are in that community now?
I would assume Walmart.
No, it's a hospital that's growing in a town that's shrinking because the opioid epidemic, just all the ills of poverty, just drive at that community, and it cause all sorts of social ills. So you have the hospital, you have the drug rehabilitation clinic that was a very small little nonprofit when I was there. I actually served on the board on it for a while. now is the second largest employer in that community. They're buying up old factories to put beds in them for inpatient treatment centers. And the third is the state prison. They weren't even close to the top employers when I was a kid. And so we have to recognize that if we destroy communities, what we leave behind is things that are going to collapse. I mean, you can't have sewage systems rotting under streets either, right? So, it's one thing to come in heavy, say it's polluting, shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. But without alternatives and without other ways to drive the economy, you're leaving behind just absolute devastation. And that's what we wrestle with every day, because we're not climate deniers at all, right? I mean, you just heard me talking about the worst effects of climate change.
Right.
We totally recognize it. But what we don't always agree on is how we practically fix it. Because it's also true, when you start offline a bunch of baseload coal-fired power plants, I love solar and wind. Like we're happy to build solar and wind, right? We've been training in it for decades. But it's still a fact that only 5% of the bulk power in this country is solar power. And it's going to take a long, long time to scale up, and also to figure out how it works in a place where you have a major snowstorm in like Boston, to where you get snow piled up on solar panels and you can't even get in there to clear them off and start generating electricity again. It's hard enough just to keep the power lines healthy enough to deliver the electricity without having to worry about the generation sources. So, there's some real economic, but also practical problems with how we generate power and deliver it. And so we have to switch to things that are true baseload power to complement it. Without things like nuclear power, solar and wind will never reach their full potential. It's impossible to do. They're intermittent power sources. They're good power sources when they're working well, but they're intermittent. They also need something like nuclear, coal, natural gas cleaned up, right? And I understand the argument between there's no such thing as clean coal, right? But there's carbon capture technologies now that can pretty much take it down to no emissions. And I'm not saying all coal plants. I don't think you'll see another major coal plant built in the United States ever.
Probably not. No, you're right. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Austin Kaiser. Austin's the assistant to the president for government affairs at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW. You want to check out their website, IBEW.org. In talking about this, and I'm 100% with you, because I witnessed, and I think as a country, we witnessed all of the ill effects of something going away. We all lived through deindustrialization of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I remember those steel mill jobs, those auto worker jobs, those jobs that were the bedrock of a middle class just evaporate. And with it came all of the negatives that you're talking about: alcoholism, drug use, domestic violence, high crime, all high suicide rates, all of this stuff. And learning from those examples as we move forward, I think, is an absolute must, which is why I liked Jay Inslee. I liked his just transition plan with his Green New Deal kind of program, because it talked about just this. It talked about, as we shut down one industry, we move those workers into that next industry and give them good union jobs with good union wages, so they don't lose their standard of living.
Yeah, I would look. I like Jay Inslee a lot, and I think that's a well-intentioned plan, right? And in a macro, it's good because you have to create new jobs. But what we have to think more about is the micro, right? So I like the Biden, Jennifer Granholm discussion a lot better about how we do place-based strategies, right? Where we look at the brownfields in the United States, and that's where we incentivize development, right? So because creating 10,000 jobs in California doesn't replace the 800 that were lost in the Ohio River Valley last year, right? It's not that easy, especially now, because you need two incomes to feed a family. So, if I lose my job and my wife is still a school teacher or she's a nurse in the local community, now I have a tough decision. Do we uproot and move and chase jobs? It used to be an easy decision back in the day, right? The coal plant shut down. Dad worked. They packed up the bags and they headed to Detroit and got a job in the auto plant, right? And they started their family, they moved their family, and it's just not that easy anymore. So that's a hard part. So what we like is a different concept, and what we've put forward, I wouldn't say it's completely different. I think it dovetails well with what Inslee was talking about and how we can put these things together. But what we like is a worker retention program, right? What it essentially does is it replaces the wages of these workers for a certain period of time and incentivizes the energy companies to keep these folks on payroll. They're union members. They have pensions. They have health care. So it's not just their wages that we're talking about here, right? So some of them are old enough that we can transition over into a full retirement of what they would have got 5 years from now. Some of them are younger folks, middle of their career folks that need to figure out what they're going to do. So keeping them on their payroll for about 5 years while they either transition inside the company and move into another sector. And it's even a complicated issue because the matrix of state regulations, some power companies who do generation aren't allowed to own their transmission lines, right? So there might be a growth in transmission, a need for power alignment, but that's not the same employer. But how do we take that time to train them, but keep them on pay where they can continue to drive their local economy and their economy doesn't fall apart in the process of the transition?
Now, this is right in line with what I talk about with automation, that there should be, a technology tax. There should be something that ensures that those people who are losing their jobs to automation, especially when you're talking about the truck driver jobs of the future that are going to go away. A lot of guys are in their 50s. You're not going to retrain them to be, computer programmers. That's not going to happen. But they shouldn't lose their standard of living. So there should be something in place to look, I'm not saying punish these companies, but make them responsible for what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to do it, right? I mean, there's tax money that can go in here too, right? I mean, we ought to be looking at it compounds really quickly. So the biggest job compounder in any community are the energy jobs, the power plant worker job, right? In a nuke plant, for instance, there are 10 jobs relying upon that one job in that community. That's the biggest multiplier of any measured industry. And they're also the highest wage and hour jobs that exist in our community. So I'm not talking about nuke, but coal's not far behind that, and natural gas isn't far behind that. And so if we just say it's about the worker and that worker deserves his pay, that's really not the whole story, right? Because it goes really quick from him or her to their family, to their community, to the other jobs, to their family, to their community. I watched Portsmouth, Ohio come apart at the seams over a matter of 6 or 7 years. It was just absolutely you couldn't find a parking spot downtown when I was a kid to the day I graduated from high school. There was barely a business open in downtown. And that was all because of those job losses.
Yeah,
and so we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be sensitive to that, and the place-based strategies are the solution. How do we take those new jobs and put them exactly where those industries were lost, not just sort of a macro vision of creating jobs over here means that this community somehow is made whole.
It's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. And I'm sure as the weeks and months come along, we're going to have you back to talk about this because this isn't going to go away. And I'm all in favor. I'm all in favor of making the workers whole. That should be our first starting point. Yeah, we want to address climate change. We want to address all of those other things. But at first, you got to make sure that the workers are whole and that they're taken care of. But Austin, I appreciate the time and the work that you guys do. I know you'll come back and share some more with us down the road.
Anytime, brother. Thank you.
Good stuff. Our good friend Austin Kaiser. Make sure you check out the website. IBEW.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do just that. If you missed any of the interview, if you're just tuning in, grab the podcast. I'll take the program on the go wherever you go. TheRickSmithShow.com is where you get it. Share it with your friends. Spread it around. All the good news. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1929, and 3,000 workers in New South Wales, Australia were locked out of their jobs. Australia was in the midst of the Great Depression. A judge had ruled that the timber industry could increase the work week from 44 hours to 48, while simultaneously lowering the workers' wages. Standing firm in opposition, the workers refused to comply with the mandatory 4-hour increase in work without pay. The company responded by charging in the courts that the workers had gone on strike. This invoked penalties under the 1928 Arbitration Amendment Act. During the strike, women played an important role, holding weekly meetings and gathering food donations from throughout Sydney for the families impacted by the lockout. Women delivered speeches in support of the strikers, harassed scab workers, and held fundraisers to support the cause. Trade unions in the city also supported the strike, holding a rally of 25,000 workers in March. Then, the same judge who had decided on the increase in hours ordered the union to hold a secret ballot vote on the issue of the strike. This marked the first time a secret ballot vote over a strike had occurred in Australia. In a protest demonstration, 3,000 timber workers burned their ballots in defiance. They also burned an effigy of the judge. When the secret vote finally occurred, management's proposals were roundly defeated by a margin of more than 5-1. In the end, however, it was a losing battle. The ravages of the Great Depression were too much to overcome. After more than 8 weeks on strike, the workers returned to the 48-hour workweek. Leaders of the strike faced criminal charges of unlawful conspiracy by violence and threats of violence, but were eventually acquitted by a jury. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. You got a question, comment, thought, something popped into your head, want to hear it? Also, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Just real quick on what we were talking about. The idea of a just transition is something that I think is important. What we learned through all the bad trade deals, and understand every bad trade deal we've come up with has the TAA in it, Trade Adjustment Assistance. And what that says is we know we're going to lose jobs. We know that individuals are going to lose jobs. We know people are going to be affected. So what we're going to do is policy-wise, we're going to give you a little bit extra unemployment benefits. You can collect unemployment for up to 2 years, I guess. We'll pay for you to go to community college. We're going to help you get a certificate so you can go, instead of that $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 job you had, maybe get a $25,000 one. But hey, we're going to help you. And this has always been one of those things that's really infuriating to me, because you never, the studies are out there, the reports are out there. You never get the kind of wages, the benefits, the standard of living you had when that happens. You lose an entire portion of your life because of these bad deals. And policy did this. And I've always said that we've got to make it much more costly for companies to abandon this country. We've got to make it a little more costly to use new technology. There's a bunch of reports running around right now that automation has caused like 50% of the job loss and the inequality, because all these jobs are going away, they're being automated, and that's the reason. And I've said for the longest time, stop policy-wise giving these companies tax breaks to upgrade their materials, their machines to put people out of work. I'm not a Luddite, but at some point, as a working class, we've got to stop kicking ourselves by funding our demise. And for truck drivers, automated trucks are here. It's not that they're coming. They're here. They've already logged millions and millions of miles on the road. They've already done this. It's just a matter of when they unleash them on the rest of society. And when they decide, hey, we're gonna convoys of driverless vehicles, run nonstop. What's going to happen to all of those drivers? I know, but Rick, there's a driver shortage. No, there's not a driver shortage. There's not. There's first and foremost, a misuse of drivers. We don't use drivers' time at all efficiently in this country. Why? Because it's theirs. If the wheels aren't going round and round, they're not getting paid. And the vast majority of them, because we're not a unionized country anymore in trucking, the vast majority of them get no waiting pay. Or if they do, it's days down the road. So you've got a problem with, we're not using the resources that we have. But two, it's crummy conditions. It's poverty, it's poor wages, poor benefits, abusive dispatchers, rough conditions, being away from home. That makes it for, hey, you better be paying us a better wage so we attract people. When I started working in the freight industry, over 30 years ago, they never had any shortages. Never. In fact, when they put out a hiring sign out front, there were a line of people. Why? Paid great wages. I recently had a conversation with a guy who was a recruiter. He was hiring truck drivers. And he said, the company I worked for, we used to, 30 years ago, we used to have people lined up around the door. And I said, yeah, you know why? I go, it's pretty simple. Why? And I took out my phone. I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator. I punched in the wage that I earned back in 1988, which was $14 an hour. Typed it in a little thing there, and I said, in today's dollars, that's over $32 an hour. That was the start. Are you paying $32 an hour to start? No, you're not even paying $32 an hour for people who have been there 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. That's why you don't have as many people willing to sacrifice and work in the horrible conditions and give up their lives. And this is the same kind of thing. We need a just transition. Look, I'm all in favor of climate change, and I'm with Austin on that. I'm all in favor of moving forward on climate change, but it cannot be done on the backs of the working class. It can't be. And this is where, I love the fact that our friends at the Blue Green Alliance are bringing together the steelworkers and the Sierra Club to move forward on policy. I love that because it means that we're looking at it from both perspectives. That we need to move forward on this, but it's got to be done in a way where, every working person, loses. Because look at our rural communities, man. Look at some of these places where job losses have been gone. Look what happened. These abandoned communities with all of these horribly negative outcomes. This is the failure of policy, failure of leadership. And I still can't get over the guy in Ohio, the representative in Ohio, who, one of his constituents came to him and said, hey, we don't have any jobs here. The town has no businesses in it. The storefronts are empty. All you see is addicts everywhere. People are sick and dying. And what are you going to do about it? Well, nothing. You should just move. That's our political system. Because that's a Republican there in Ohio who isn't afraid of being voted out of office, and that's a damn shame. Let's move along. What's the matter with Kansas? I hear that question a lot. Evidently, Kansas, a lot of drinking going on, or at least in the state government. The fourth Kansas lawmaker has been arrested for DUI. This state representative Susie Carlson, arrested on suspicion of driving while under the influence. You go, I guess, COVID, maybe. See, here's the argument that I would make. If I'm her, this is how I beat COVID. This alcohol and driving together. Hey, there are a bunch of crackpot ideas out there. Who knows? Who knows where that goes? And let's talk about someone who appears to be drinking. I look at Texas Congressman Chip Roy, who evidently over the last 3 days has said that he's promoted this idea that Justin Trudeau has snuck into the U.S. He's hiding out from the truckers' convoy, and he's snuck into the U.S. And it's not true. He's not here. He didn't sneak into the U.S., and he wouldn't have to. But he's now calling for the U.S. to deport a guy who's not here. So just thought I would throw that out there. And speaking of Chip Roy, evidently the House voted to rename a post office in Atlanta after the late John Lewis. The vote was 402-0. Chip Roy voted present. What kind of snot does that? I mean, stop and think about this for a second. It's a post office in Atlanta, where John Lewis was a representative forever, a civil rights icon. And I guess what this shows is it shows where Roy and a lot of his Q-nuts, where their mindset is. And the fact that we've seen this rise in hate for these minority groups. I mean, I'm struggling with where we're going. 16 historically black colleges and universities getting bomb threats. That's old school terrorism. Now, old school terrorism, I'm not Not saying anything that this is work. I'm not comparing the 50s and 60s and beyond to what's going on, but this is what they used to do back then, where you couldn't walk without being afraid. You couldn't walk around. And look, I learned this in a big way back in 2015. I grew up in a housing project where I was the minority. Most people in my community were black. And we used to play this neat game called Chase the White Kid and Beat Him Up. I'm sure it was a fun game had I not been the white kid. But, I look at this and I didn't really learn black history because really, even in that community, even in a predominantly black community, didn't learn the history. Learn the simple stuff. Martin Luther King, gave the speech. Rosa Parks was tired. Stuff like that. Nothing in depth. Nothing that was, nothing like what I learned in 2015. And what we did back then is we went on a civil rights tour, which came out of a conversation with my daughter, who was in school at the time. And you have those conversations with your kid. Hey, what'd you do today? What'd you learn? And, she said, we learned about Rosa Parks. So I'm curious. I go, so what'd you learn? Well, she was tired. And I, over the years, I did learn a little bit more than just she's tired. And I'm going, no more than that. And no, that's it, just tired. So I decided that, let's go and take, the whole crew on the road. Let's go and find these stories. We went to the Rosa Parks Museum in Montgomery, Alabama, on the campus of Troy University. And it was incredible. I mean, just this incredible facility. And, thank you, Dr. Felicia Brown and Ricky Brown for giving us the tour there. It was informative to the point where I felt stupid walking into it because there was so much more to it than just, she was tired. And out of it, a couple of people got together and drove people around. There was an entire network with the Montgomery bus boycott. There was an entire network of, and an entire, set of, signals and signs and all kinds of stuff that, you have to be able to see and feel and touch, which is why I was glad we were able to do it. And that's the reason I'm bringing this up is this month is Black History Month. And we are going back to the archives. We're pulling out some of the interviews from 2015, some incredible stories. And we're putting them out on podcasts for people to be able to go back and listen to people who lived the history. And in one of the podcasts, and there were a number of moments, and to be quite frank, that I was stopped in my tracks. I'm rarely at a loss for words. But there were a couple of moments where there were no words. And I think of, and I'll probably never forget this man as long as I live. Small, little, frail black guy, probably in his late 60s, early 70s, was brought to my setup because we went and we did a whole bunch of interviews. And so the person who would put it together for me, Terry Rector, she came and she brought this guy and sat down. She said, "This is Fate Morris. Fate, was going to talk about the 16th Street Baptist church bombing. I don't know who he is. The Morris name doesn't mean anything to me. It's not triggering. There's nothing catching my attention." And he goes through and he starts talking about the day of the bombing, and he's walking through, where he was, what he was doing, what his friends were doing, and he's telling this story, and I'm going, okay, great, we're going along this, and all of a sudden I look up, and this is in my head as it happened yesterday, and here is this man with just tears streaming down his face as he begins to tell me about after the bomb exploded, he raced back to the church as fast as he could run, digging through the rubble, trying to find people who survived, trying to find, people. And he said he lifted up a door, and underneath the door, he found his sister's headless body. And he just completely broke. And at that moment, I was not expecting, I was in no way, shape, or form prepared for that. And just stopped. Just completely stopped. And did the only thing that I could think of in that moment was to get up and go and console him. Even though I don't know how you console that. And when you think about history, and this is the part that I took from this tour. When you think about history, and we learn about it in this country, it's just words on a page. It's just, facts and dates and names and, just images on a page from a far, far away era. It's history. It's in the past. It's way back there. But when you look into the eyes of the man who lived through his sister being murdered, and even after all these years, still breaking every time he tells the story, it kind of grabs you. And that whole incident did a lot to me, because when we did the tour, and understand, in the South, if they did bad things to black people, they now have museums, because it's horrible tourism. If we did some horrible stuff, we got a museum. But in the one in Birmingham, I still remember it. There was a little glass case, and in the glass case was the personal items of the 4 little girls who got killed, who never had a chance to do anything to anyone. This is the part that's just insane to me. But in that case was, like a little purse kind of thing that, my own 2 daughters could have been holding. And inside of it, little tissues and little things that my own 2 daughters could have had. And look, I'm not emotional. I'm not somebody who gets all worked up. I don't get teary-eyed. But I almost did. It was one of those things that has grabbed me. And even, look, that's almost 6.5 years ago. I still remember those moments like they were yesterday, because they made that kind of an impression. And look, there were a number of those, not to that extent, but there were a number of those stories that we came across in interviewing people. We were on the road for about 2.5 weeks, all through, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana. We were all over the place. So make sure you get the podcast. Lots of stuff we're going to be putting out. Share with your friends. It is Black History Month, and maybe here's the part where I'm getting at this, because normally I stay away from Black History Month as an old white guy. It is not my lane. But now, given the fact that our Republican friends have made this such a big deal, actual history to me is extremely important. Getting people to understand that there is actual history, that is a big deal. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Make sure you grab the podcast. You can get that link at thericksmithshow.com, too. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1848. That was the day the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. It signaled the end of the Mexican-American War. The war began in May of 1846 when the United States sought to expand its annexation of Texas. It immediately became a partisan issue between pro- and anti-slavery forces. Southern Democrats and slave plantation owners favored war with Mexico. They hoped to undercut rising Northern industrial power with the expansion of slave territory. Whigs and Northern abolitionists opposed the war for the same reasons. After almost 2 years of fighting, the war ended. In exchange for $15 million, the United States gained 525,000 square miles of land. This territory included all or parts of Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. Mexico gave up all claims to Texas, and the Rio Grande was established as the border. The initial treaty promised protection of land, civil rights, and full citizenship for those Mexicans who stayed on the newly acquired territory. These guarantees were deleted from the final ratification. Expansionist aims reignited debates about the extension of slavery. The newly formed Free Soil Party gained traction with its campaign to limit, localize, and discourage slavery. Their banner read, "Free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men." Antagonisms were briefly tempered with the Compromise of 1850. This allowed California to be admitted as a free state. It also prevented the outlawing of slavery in the new territories. The slave trade was banned in the District of Columbia, but a new and more stringent fugitive slave law was enacted. Debates regarding expansion of slavery would rage on throughout the 1850s, culminating in the Civil War.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, one of the things that's interesting to me right now is you look at Republicans being Republicans. I'm often amazed that people are surprised when you see something come out of someone like Ted Cruz's mouth, for instance, or Ron Johnson's mouth, that you go, oh my gosh, it's shocking. I can't believe they believe that this, whatever idiocy that it is. And then people act surprised. And I keep coming back to the Maya Angelou quote. You know, when people tell you who they are, hello, believe them. And the thing that gets me is these people, this is who they've been for a very, very long time. The difference in the Trump era, they now feel emboldened to come out and say it in public. And they have no shame. And I have some of my liberal friends go, oh, don't the folks on the right understand the hypocrisy? Yeah, they do. They just don't care. Because, well, they're all of the same mindset. And here to share some thoughts on, well, some of the insanity that's been going on and the folks who are actually paying attention. I've asked Tim Hogan to come talk with us. He's the executive editor of Heartland Signal. Their website, heartlandsignal.com. They're the folks paying attention. They're the folks watching these people, writing it down, and letting everyone else know exactly who they are. That's why I've asked Tim Hogan to come talk with us. Tim is the executive editor there at Heartland Signal. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I'm looking at this. We'll go through a bunch of this stuff, but I'm looking at the Ron Johnson bit. And this goes back to, you may remember when Hillary wrote her book, It Takes a Village. And the Republicans pushed back on that in nice ways, maybe not so nice ways, but they never came out and said, we don't give a damn about anyone else's children. They now feel quite emboldened to come out and say, we don't care about anybody's children but ours. And I guess it's a refreshing moment, and maybe a moment of clarity for some, but for people like me, this is who they've always been.
Yeah, it feels like a moment of shocked but not surprised. This is who they are. They have told us who they are. I think some of the times when we're monitoring the news at Heartland Signal, you can follow us on Twitter at Heartland Signal. We do a lot of dives into not just Ron Johnson, because Wisconsin is in the signal area of WCPT 20. We reach 8 of the 10 largest cities in Wisconsin. But we also look at state legislatures, and it's almost like you think they must simply run out of novel ways to put their foot in their mouth. There can't be any more ways for them to say this, but they always find a way. And, for a long time now, we've seen Ron Johnson be the chief spreader of misinformation about the vaccines, which is important. And we report on that, and that should be covered. But what we saw recently with him talking about childcare and saying it's not society's responsibility to raise anyone else's children, that is something that we know that people in Wisconsin care about, that it is a bread and butter issue, that it is part of the Build Back Better agenda that people care about and want to see passed. And for him to say, someone who voted for the tax cuts in 2017, also not until he got his special kickback for his donors in that legislation, to say that funding childcare is not society's responsibility. His priorities, he tells you what they are.
No, and this is where, we've been saying for a while, they're now saying the quiet part out loud, the things that they've been saying to themselves in their country clubs and in their back rooms, their smoke-filled back rooms. They're now feeling emboldened to say it out loud because, look, they've got their base riled. And their base isn't thinking. They're simply reacting. And I'm sure there's somebody out there going to go, yeah, you're right. Because this is a kind of dog whistle. Because most people think, well, they're not talking about my kids. They're talking about those people's kids. And we know who those people's kids are.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, look, I will say we were just listening to a telephone town hall that Ron Johnson did today. He ended the town hall about 20 minutes ago. And you want to talk about dog whistles. We're talking about voter ID on that telephone town hall. And he has a caller who says, you know, in my rural community, I can go to the voting booth and the person at the table will ask me for my ID, but I'll say, oh, you know who I am. And Ron Johnson chuckles along and says, haha, yeah, exactly. But what we're really talking about here is Milwaukee. Milwaukee tends to report their votes really late, and they wait to see what the margin is that needs to be made up. Then they report their votes. What is that exactly? That is a super clear dog whistle. And it's every time he opens his mouth, that's the message that he delivers.
Yeah. No, it's like where I live in Pennsylvania, we had a gubernatorial candidate who got caught, you know, with the saying the silent thing out loud. This is back in 2010. Tom Corbett was asked, "How do you think you're gonna fare?" And he goes, "Well, if we could just hold the vote down in Philadelphia, we'll be fine." And you go, you know, why not just say we could just hold those? We could just throw those black people out. We'll win. But that's what they're saying it out loud now. And I'm waiting for the day. And maybe you'll come with me on this. Maybe you won't. But I'm waiting for them because they're dying. They're itching to say it. They're interested to say, you know, instead of saying those people, they're dying to use the word that they view as forbidden because they can say it. Why can't we? You know, they're dying to say it.
Well, I think, you know, in Wisconsin with Ron Johnson too, he's been focused on, you know, the Wisconsin Election Commission as well. And it's not just the threat to elections, particularly in that state, is very dangerous right now. He wants to have the Wisconsin Election Commission basically disbanded. He thinks that the legislature should have power to run elections without any approval from the governor. It's his own constitutional interpretation. You know, numerous scholars have said that is not right, but that is the fight for voting rights, is having people's votes count who you want counted and not counting others. I think as Senator Raphael Warnock said that the issue with voting rights legislation right now is that some people don't want some people to vote. And I feel like that's one of the most succinct ways I've heard it put.
Well, I think, you know, you go back to 1980 with the Paul Weyrich quote. I'm sure you've seen it, where he asks 20,000 Baptist ministers, good men of the cloth, if they want everyone to vote. And he says, I don't want everyone to vote. He says, our leverage goes up as the voting populace goes down. And he was very clear that we're going to do whatever we can do to get our people out. And I admire that. We should be doing the same on all sides. But then it's that next step of suppressing everyone else, holding everyone else down, which has been the playbook since about that era, which is infuriating. But I look at someone like Johnson, and again, you know, am I surprised he doesn't care about other people's kids, especially the other people's kids? No, not at all. But, you know, the extent that he's willing to go and the fact that he doesn't fear the voters, that's concerning to me, because I look at this and go, no, we do need to help families who are struggling. We do need to get that extra $250 a month into struggling families' pockets so that those kids have something to eat at the end of the month. You know, this was the cruel trick. And look, I as a kid grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. I remember going to the cupboards at the end of the month and there being nothing there. So I know what this looks like. How cruel was it that during those last 6 months of last year, there was a check that came in that made sure there was food at the end of the month, and that this month, or in January, when those kids went to the cupboard, that money wasn't there, so those cupboards may have been bare again? How cruel was that to show them the possible and then strip that away from them?
I mean, look, like one of the first stories that we did when we launched our site in November is we talked to parents in Illinois, in Chicago, about what that meant for them. And it was so clear. It was exactly that. It was food in the cupboard. It was diapers. It was necessities. It was not, as one Democratic senator, you know, implied. I'm very clear who I'm talking about, that money was being spent on drugs. That money is not being spent on drugs. There are studies that confirm that. And it was a hugely popular policy because it looked at the necessity of economic survival for so many people, and it met a need. And you know, to the point on Ron Johnson on childcare again, once again, it's everybody. You know, people need help. This is the government's role to provide that assistance for people. And you know, his Q4 fundraising numbers were among the worst of any of the senators who are running. And you know, I'm not saying that that's a reflection of where he's at. He'll probably fire it up now that we're in the on year. But you know, he doesn't poll very well in Wisconsin right now. Again, that'll tighten. But I don't think consistently being on the opposite side of extremely popular policy is a good plan for someone who's a vulnerable senator.
Now, just remember, these are the people who tell us, you know what's coming. These are the people who tell us that they're pro-life, pro-family. They're the party of family values, and they pull crap like this. I mean, that's just blows my mind. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Tim Hogan. Tim is the executive editor over at Heartland Signal. You can check out their website, heartlandsignal.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. But, you know, Tim, you know, the child thing isn't the only part that, you know, Johnson's on the wrong side of. Did I miss something? You know, I've been watching a lot of football lately, and there's been some really great games. I haven't seen anyone drop dead on the field. I did, however, see Antonio Brown strip. You know, I saw that, but I don't remember anyone dying. Has Johnson been able to confirm someone on the field actually curling over and dying on the field? The last guy I remember was back in the 70s against the Bears.
No, yeah, he hasn't, right? And it was so clear when he said this statement to Charlie Kirk on his podcast that he cribbed from John Stockton, right? And is now saying athletes are dying on the field left and right. I mean, like, I feel like if that had happened, we may have seen some footage of it. We may have seen some articles of it. But no, and his communications team taken really off guard, obviously, when I think CNN was the first to reach out to them for comment on this. And clearly we're baffled by their own boss's statements, which I'm sure is not an abnormal occurrence when you work for Ron Johnson. But it's just the latest thing that he has said to inject more COVID misinformation into the public sphere. I mean, at Heartland Signal, we were the first folks who were on his teletown hall when he said, look, if you get the coronavirus, you can do a standard gargle. It helps, you know, stop the replication of the virus. And, you know, when you get fact checked by Listerine, that's probably a bad day. But, you know, Listerine is out there having to clarify his statements. And, you know, he in his telephone town hall tonight, one of his constituents asked him, where do you get your information on COVID? And he did say at one point that he's on a lot of email chains with doctors. So I don't know if these are forwarded emails he's getting, but, you know, I mean, how he has served as an amplifier of some of the worst information on the coronavirus. I mean, it's a threat to public health. It's a huge threat to public health.
We got a senator whose definition of research is sitting on the can, you know, skimming through Facebook memes. And that's not a good thing to have. We used to have senators who were, you know, a little more articulate, a little more thoughtful. But, you know, the thing is and I'm in a weird spot here. If you're at this moment buying what Ron Johnson is selling, we now know that the unvaccinated are the ones who are dying at a much higher rate than everyone else, that they're the ones who are going to suffer the most. And eventually capitalism will figure this out and force them to pay higher premiums and all the stuff that comes along with that. I'm at the point where I don't care anymore. If you believe that nonsense, maybe it's okay. We let some folks go. Maybe that's how we begin to thin the herd. I don't know any other way at this moment if you haven't figured out and done your research. And don't you love the people who say, you know, I got to do my research? Wouldn't you just love to see their reading list? I'd love to see Ron Johnson's reading list. I would love to see Ron Johnson's reading list. Just the amount of misinformation he's put out is remarkable. You know, he held a panel called A Second Opinion in Washington, D.C. with some of the leading misinformation doctors on COVID-19. You know, he had people speaking who had called the vaccine a fake vaccine. They had called it the clot shot. One of them had called it needle rape. So, you know, people of the highest caliber at this panel. But it's not just him going on, a TV show or a radio interview.
and spreading this misinformation. It's him platforming people in wider settings and then pushing that message out. And just, one thing that's so important about progressive radio, and I think what you're doing and what WCPT does, is the way that the radio infrastructure has developed for the right wing, particularly in a state like Wisconsin, particularly in Southeast Wisconsin. It is just dangerous. I mean, that is what Ron Johnson does every day. I actually don't know how he finds the time to do it. He's on the radio constantly. I don't know that he does.
No, I've been saying this, Tim, I've been saying this for 20 years. I've been doing this program 17 years because of just that. That there is no alternative voice. There's no counterbalance. There's no check on the insanity. And look what it's gotten us. Look how you brought up needle rape, which I've heard a bunch of times. These are people who actually are glorifying rape. And in fact, you guys had a story about this Garrett Soldano. I guess he's a candidate for governor in Michigan. I sure hope there's no chance he wins. But he's on this thing of how God puts people in the moment if they're raped and they want them to have the baby and all this. I'm going, if I don't know that I'm really willing to go there to see Garrett get raped and make him carry a child to term, because I'm not that cruel.
Well, I mean, when we heard him say this, right? And what he said is, maybe this child could be the next president, right? Which is an interesting hypothetical because the child could be anything. The child could be the next president. The child could be someone who murders somebody. So that is always an interesting line of logic. But, for him to say that, we just have to convince these women that it's heroic and we have to inspire them to be courageous is just such demeaning language. And, that clip that we found of that interview, which, by the way, he did with a local anchor who retired from her local TV station after saying she was a Project Veritas plant at the station and was going to reveal all the inner workings of the station. So, normal place to do an interview. That clip got picked up a bunch of places. The View talked about it today. And Garrett Soldano is someone that we do have to watch in Michigan. There's James Craig, who's leading, I think, the gubernatorial race on the Republican side. But Garrett Soldano raised the second most amount of money. So he's in contention. And,
Yep.
Michigan is a swing state. It's a close state. It's 2022. It's really scary that someone like him could get really close to becoming the next governor.
But here again, right where we started off, we'll finish off where we started off. This isn't new. They've been saying this stuff for decades. They've been pushing this stuff for decades. They've shown us that they despise women. They've shown us that they want women barefoot and back in the closet. They want blacks back in the fields. They want gays back in the closet. This is what they want. They're telling us it's our responsibility. It's our job to make sure that we listen and not allow them to be in the halls of power. Just my thought.
Yeah, and that is, that's what we're doing. You said it, go see us at heartlandsignal.com. Follow us on Twitter at heartlandsignal. We're monitoring these folks. And
great stuff. Good stuff, Tim. I appreciate the time. I know you'll be back. At least I hope so. Great talk with you. I look forward to the work that you guys keep doing there. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Tim Hogan, he's the executive editor there at Heartland Signal. Make sure you check out their website, heartlandsignal.com. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Have you heard this stuff in your world? Does this pop up with the people that you deal with? I know I get it all the time. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Day in labor history, the year was 1821. That was the birthday of the first woman to earn her medical degree in the United States. Her name was Elizabeth Blackwell. She was born in Bristol, England. Her family moved to the United States when she was just 11 years old. Elizabeth decided she wanted to pursue a career in medicine. She believed that women patients should have the option of a female doctor. but it was not easy to make her dream come true. Medicine was considered men's work. Undeterred, Elizabeth began to study medicine on her own. Medical schools rejected her applications. Finally, she was accepted to the Geneva Medical College in New York. Most students at the school were horrified by the idea of a woman studying medicine, but she won many over with her ability and hard work. In 1849, she completed her work and graduated, but her difficulties were not over. No hospital in New York would hire her. She was even refused rental space when landlords found out she wanted it for a woman-run medical practice. Finally, she purchased a home for her practice. She also started a medical dispensary for the poor in New York City. She was later joined in her work by her sister, who also graduated with a medical degree. She went on to lecture on medicine in England, becoming the first woman to have her name on the British Medical Register. She and her sister helped to train nurses for service during the Civil War. They also founded a women's medical college that operated for 31 years. By her determination, Elizabeth Blackwell helped open the door for future generations of women to work in the field of medicine.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So yesterday, you may remember, we had Matt Gardner on from the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, pointing out that Netflix, and look, we couldn't have gotten through the pandemic without Netflix, to be honest. But here's the thing, I'm not quite sure that the $5.3 billion in profit that they got wasn't reward enough, but that we had to go and give them massive tax breaks to the point to where they only paid 1.1% in taxes. I mean, look, I know taxes is the sexiest of topics, but I got to tell you, when you're getting robbed, you should probably pay attention, and you wonder why we're only doing about a third of the infrastructure improvements that need to be done. You're wondering why we can't get kids the $250 a month to help feed them through the month. It's because we give all the money away to Netflix, and it's not just Netflix. It's a bunch of them. I found out today, General Motors, $9.5 billion in pre-tax income. They paid an income tax rate of 0.2%. That I got to tell you, I got a problem with that. Because we've created this environment where the wealthy do really well, big corporations do even better, and while the rest of us, we're struggling. And here to share some thoughts on why that is and maybe how we can push back a little bit on it, I've asked our good friend Bob Lord to come talk with us. Bob is a general counsel there for the Americans for Taxation group. He's also an associate fellow with the Institute for Policy Studies. There's a new report out, Dynasty Trusts, Giant Tax Loopholes that supercharge wealth accumulation. Big title. We'll get links out on social media how you can check out Dynasty Trust. But Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
Dynasty Trusts. Sounds like it would be a TV show.
Well, they're wealth dynasties, Rick. You know, like the Mars family and the Walton family. Or $200 billion.
Or the Hershey Trust. I mean, there are a bunch of these out there. Why is this a bad thing? You know, I have friends who go, no, Hershey was wonderful. Granted, he was a low-level robber baron, was just as bad and as evil and everything as the other robber barons. But, you know, his money then was put into a trust, and now it's helping orphan children.
Right. And that's in part because of the way the tax laws worked 60 or 70 years ago. But they're not working that way anymore.
So how is it now? I mean, I was looking at some of the things in the report, as you guys point out, that the top 5 dynastic families saw their inflation-adjusted income increase 34-fold between 1983 and 2020, from $15.5 billion to $528 billion. How do I get that kind of return on investment? I guess become a billionaire.
Yeah. But the trouble is getting to be a billionaire. Once you're a billionaire, you can have that kind of return.
And ultimately not have to pay taxes on it. So walk me through some of the findings in this report, some of the more outrageous things. Because look, we've been trained in this country to think, hey, they worked hard. The guy who was the CEO of Kroger, he really worked hard. He deserved that 909 times the average wage of the worker there. He deserved that because he was shuffling a lot of papers, damn it. We've been trained to believe that they worked so hard, and yet we don't. Well, don't. It's kind of crazy to me.
Well, because it is crazy. Michael Bloomberg in one of the debates was asked about his $70 billion, and he said, "No, I worked hard for that. I deserve it." But here's the thing: in the way our economy works, you're going to have people like the Waltons and the Marses that accumulate vast sums of wealth. And the only way you can address it is once every generation taking a big whack at it. Half of it goes to the government, because otherwise you're just going to get richer and richer and richer. But over the last 45 or 50 years, we've changed the rules so that we're no longer taking that slice out of their wealth. And that's why these fortunes are just... The amount they've grown up until now is nothing compared to what's going to happen for the next 30 or 40 years if we don't change it.
So you see the jaws of inequality getting wider and wider. You don't see them snapping back.
We're going to have people walking around, families with trillion-dollar net worths. That's crazy.
Why? Let me throw the why out there, because I got a lot of friends who, Elon Musk is doing wonderful things. He's going to help humanity get to Mars. Jeff Bezos brought us Amazon. It's so wonderful. We're so happy. What's wrong with having these gazillionaires who bring us wonderful things?
Here's what's wrong with it. If their upside had been $100 million rather than $100 billion, they would have done things exactly the same way, which means we're paying them 1,000 times more than we needed to pay them.
Okay, but still, they earned it. We have a system in this country that if you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead, and they just got a lot further ahead than the rest of us.
Well, I think it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, "You don't make $1 billion, you take $1 billion."
So in looking at this, because, we've had rich people in the past, and one of the things that I say all the time is that I don't like to have somebody who is so powerful that the rest of us don't have the same power politically. When you've got a billionaire who's can self-fund an election and doesn't really care about we the people, you have outweighted power. That's a bad thing for democracy. Is there another argument against this kind of mass accumulation of wealth?
Well, that's the strongest argument. But also, they're strangling the rest of us. I mean, that wealth that they're sitting on, that's going to grow and grow and grow, which, by the way, they could never ever need. You can't spend $1 billion. So that wealth they're sitting on, that's saving the climate. That's saving the planet. That wealth, if it's taxed properly, that's what we need to get down to zero carbon emissions.
Now, I've said for a long time, I like the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower's tax code. I think the bigger your shoulders are, the more water you bring back to the cave, like in the old days, like when the caveman roamed the earth. We don't seem to think that way anymore. I mean, our tax code seems to be kind of upside down. When Netflix makes this enormous amount of money and pays a paltry 1.1%, when General Motors has pre-tax income of $9.5 billion and they pay 0.02%, there's a problem here.
Yes, there is. But so you don't see your Social Security taxes being reduced. You don't see the sales tax you pay when you go to a restaurant being reduced. It's only the big guys that are getting their taxes reduced.
So out of this report, and look, you pointed out a bunch of stuff that the wealthy are getting obscenely wealthy. We're growing further and further apart. These trusts are going to be ginormous if they're not, they're now ginormous and have built, but they're going to be even worse in the future. What's the answer? How do we get to a place where you don't have a Kirsten Sinema who's going to thwart any attempt to rein some of this stuff in, where it seems like our political system has already been bought and paid for and then bought and paid for again? What do? We
rise up. We don't just vote every 4 years or every 2 years. We get out in the streets and we demand the change.
And what does that change look like? What are we pushing for? I mean, we didn't always have an estate tax, but Republicans over the last 50 years have done their damn fool best to make sure that the wealthy get away with not paying any estate tax. Because oh my God, it's the death tax. They have done a much better job of convincing people and training us like Pavlovian dogs to anytime we hear the IRS or we hear taxes that we just begin to foam at the mouth and get all bunched up in the panties like Jojo the Idiot Boy. How do we undo that? How do you make this about, hey, democracy is at stake here? The kind of outweighted wealth and power that these families, these 750 some odd families have it's not healthy for us.
Well, we did it before, right? We did it in 1916, enacting the estate tax and then strengthening it and making things work, and we do it again. It's just a matter of the will of people to get out there and fight for what they want, and we've been a little bit too comfortable. We're going to have to get uncomfortable. We're going to have to get out in the streets.
But as a society, we've been told and we bought into it. I mean, Trump said he doesn't want to pay taxes. You've got one of his economic advisors, as you point out in the piece, this Gary Cohn, who said only morons pay estate tax. And he's right. Only morons pay estate tax given the scenario we are. Again, policy-wise, is there anything moving? Is there anything going on? Is there anything we can do to? What?
Well, you know the answer to that. Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are standing in the way.
Yes, they are. What are you hoping comes out of this piece? It's a lengthy piece. There's tons of things that as I was reading through it, just sent me fuming through the air. What are you hoping comes out of it?
Well, I already got what I wanted. I had you fuming through the air. So, perfect.
So is that my blood pressure? That was the point. Rick. So that was the point. Fire up my blood pressure. What I think is important about your piece here, and what I hope folks will take a look at, is all of the ways that are out there. Now, you're a tax guy, and we could probably spend time digging through the old tax code. I know so many people will be excited about that. But there are so many ways that they dodge paying taxes. And the reason I brought up the Cohen quote is he's right. In this day and age, the way things are right now, only a moron would pay the estate tax because there are so many ways to avoid it. There are ways to evade all of this stuff. And the same thing with corporations. There are all these loopholes, all these paths, all these ways to get away from paying for the things that they take advantage of. And we're the suckers. The reason I keep talking about taxes so much is because this ticks me off. It makes me angry every time I look at my paycheck, and my paycheck is minus a bunch of money that I happily pay to our government to do the things that I need them to do. And then I know that the wealthy and the powerful, the people who have far more than I could ever imagine having, they're the ones who walk away scot-free. That is infuriating.
It's infuriating to me as well. But and what makes it even more so is it's not hard. It wouldn't be hard to enact the laws to close these darn loopholes and make these guys pay.
But then again, it comes back down to voting, back down to electing people to get in there and move forward on legislation. And it comes back to us, the working people who are so easily divided by nonsense and ridiculous divides constantly, while they are literally robbing us blind. Because, what do you say to the person who goes, but no, Rick, you're wrong. They're not robbing us. They're just making the pie bigger while taking a bigger slice of the pie. But you're still going to be okay. Because that's an argument I get occasionally.
The pie has gotten bigger, but all of the increase in the size of the pie has gone to the top. No, the average guy or average gal, they're not doing any better than their counterparts in the 1970s or 1960s.
Now, in this report, you go through a lot of the ways at which they get around paying all of them. They're creative ways that tax people like you get around rich people paying taxes. And it is a lengthy report, but I hope it's 44 pages long. I hope people will take a look at it. I have spent some time. I then put it down for a bit because blood pressure goes up. I can't have that. But there's a lot here. And I think of the money that was spent lobbying to get this stuff. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable. But it is what it is. We're going to make sure we get links out on social media so other people can have their blood pressure go up like I did. The report called Dynasty Trusts, Giant Tax Loopholes That Supercharge Wealth Accumulation, put out by the good folks at Americans for Tax Fairness. Bob, as always, fun talking with you. I appreciate the time. Good stuff. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Lord. Make sure you check out the website and the work that they do at Americans for Tax Fairness. We'll get links out to make sure that you take a look at that. Seriously, at the end of the day, when you go through this and you go, it's outrageous that they're able to basically rob us blind at every turn, that they never are responsible for paying for anything. At some point, don't you just go, enough already? We're told all the time. We're hearing it now. We're $30 trillion in debt, guys. We can't afford to do anything. Where'd we give that money away? Well, this report lays out how we gave a lot of it away. We gave it away to the very wealthy people in this country so that they could be even wealthier. And we did it in such a short period of time. And where Bob's right, we had robber barons back in the gold, back in the era, and we decided, no, we don't want those. And we made policies. And again, this is where, as a person who believes in government, a government of, for, and by we the working people, as someone who believes that, policy did this, policy can undo it. But it takes you, it takes me, it takes us standing together, undivided, to push for this stuff. Now, is it going to take another tragedy? Is it going to take, another a war, a depression, a plague? What's it going to take? I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic. If this isn't a tragedy that we can use, in times of crisis, it's the ideas laying around that get used. Never let a good crisis go to waste. This is a good crisis to use to rein in these abuses. This is a good crisis to use to go, hey, we can't afford to have gazillionaires. We can't afford to allow the future trusts of these gazillionaires to go untaxed in perpetuity. Can't do that anymore. The party for the wealthy should be over. I'm tired of footing the bill. I'm tired of footing the bill, cleaning up the mess, paying for it, and not being able to go to the party. And that, my friends, is where we are. But I suggest taking a look at it if you're interested. The Dynasty Trusts. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. Take the program on the go wherever you go by downloading the app. You can get the app, have it on your phone all the time, or just get the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. You can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally and do appreciate the conversations. Thank you. Lots to get to this week still. Lots of things on the horizon, so I hope you'll tune in again. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
For $3.5 trillion a year, shouldn't we Americans have a world-class healthcare system? Yet, while we spend the most of any advanced nation in the world to get care, more than $10,000 a year per person, we get the worst results. No surprise, then, that the Medicare for All idea is now backed by 85% of Democrats, 66% of independents, and, get this, 52% of Republicans. So why isn't Congress responding to this overwhelming public demand for universal coverage? I suspect that one big reason for Washington's big yawn over the people's plea for sweeping reform is that our lawmakers do not personally feel the financial pain and emotional distress that are inflicted on millions of regular Americans by a system built on private greed. After all, their health needs are met by a double dose of the socialistic care that they so furiously deny to our families. First, they're given big taxpayer subsidies to cover the cost of their insurance, with you and me paying about 72% of the price. But second, there's a secretive medical center located right in the U.S. Capitol building that provides a full-blown system of healthcare socialism to our governing elites. Called the OAP, Office of the Attending Physician, it provides a complete range of free medical service for lawmakers. No appointment needed and no waiting. They walk in and doctors, nurses, technicians, pharmacists, and other professionals tend to them right away. No need to show an insurance card, and they never get a bill. But they do get what a former OAP staffer calls the best health care on the planet. Thus, members feel no urgency to restructure a system that's working beautifully for them. This is Jim Hightower saying, so to get good care for all of us, we might start by taking away the pampered care that lawmakers have awarded to themselves.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower lowdown. You can see why